SFJ 4x4 Studios presents
in my oversized four-wheel drive Jeep.
a Jeep podcast starring industry experts.
Pure monosity. What? Say that again.
With mad scientist Scott Brown,
Use my drill press as a sword of blade.
our host Neil Simpson,
If one light goes out, they all go out.
filled with shenanigans.
We are really professional with Jeeps.
This is I Speak Jeep.
Fantastic. I think we're just going to be live because we're faking it till we make it today.
Yes, we are.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever, however. We thank you for joining us. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast, episode number 22. I am your host, Neil Simpson with SFJ4x4.com, and my esteemed colleague, friend.
Hashtags. Mad
Oh,
scientist.
I did it so good again.
Scott Brown.
Go ahead, mad
/
scientist.
Cleaner of tools.
Cleaner of tools. A clean tool is a happy tool.
Yes. And a found tool is a happy tool.
How many tools are you missing? Because
A
we're a
lot.
little busy.
A lot. It's really slowing me down trying to get stuff done because I'm like, where the heck?
I think your
Is
line wrench
that-
is still on my toolbox.
Probably.
We're planning a shop cleanup day.
Yeah.
We're gonna
We need
take
intervention.
we have to at this point in time. We have to take like a day
Reset button.
and hit the reset button. And we have just been going, and we need to and clean some things,
Yeah.
right?
And find some stuff.
Play to your strength, apparently, as far as your janitorial skills. Excellence. Janitorial with excellence. Folks, we appreciate that you are choosing to take some time out of your day to join us. As I mentioned, this is episode number 22. And despite the fact that we often are shooting this live on Mondays, we're actually going to take a little recess to celebrate Easter. Jesus is risen in that regard. And so we will not be in. We are instead recording Friday before Easter. And so we are we're gonna do our best to move through this because we
You're
actually shot
watching
two
the-
podcasts.
You're watching the past us. Into the
You're like
past.
time travelers or
Yes.
listening to the past us.
Yes.
Well, I suppose that's anytime you find something on YouTube or
Well, they don't know that.
We need a couple
Streaming.
people to show up to our studio right now, though, so we can say this was pre-recorded in front of a live audience.
oh, this
Well,
was
we got Davey right there.
oh,
He's a live
people
audience.
people keep threatening in the most cordial and fashionable way to be like, we're gonna show up and watch you in person. I'm like, it's not that exciting.
You know, if they did that, I'd have to bring in a speaker to set up a monitor for them so they could actually hear.
Well, that would
Because
be
Davey
bad.
says he can't really hear. That's why he's got headphones on today.
But then
I
we
think
would-
you would like that too much, Jeff.
And then we would hear ourselves, and that would be scary.
You've got headphones on. You can already hear yourself.
He
different.
would in his true audio production, self, he would have it, so that the speakers were like this one
talking about
directional
angles.
There would be reverb.
We'd have
conversation.
to put sound.
Oh my God, he'd make us move all the Jeeps so that they couldn't
just put
bounce
them
the
on the
sound back
Jeeps.
at the. Oh, we just wrap the Jeeps.
Yes.
Like in bubble wrap. Oh my gosh, folks, we're gonna continue our discussion about the probably one of my favorite topics is the no replacement for displacement. I was waiting for your kitschy cute, or is there? And we're going to be talking about historical Jeep engines,
Yep.
right? Power plants, if you will. And then we're going to be doing our hashtag not sponsored segment. And those of you who are listening, because we thank you for listening to our all three of you in our international audience. Scott is doing his best Vanna White hands at a couple very nice looking
Diff covers.
covers, right? And so this is one that's near and dear to us with all the axle gear, and functional Jeep work that we do. And then we're gonna play a little game, two truths and a lie. And so, make sure you stay tuned to the end of the podcast, or just scrub through the stuff that you don't want to listen to. And
Don't do that.
listen.
You're going to
listen.
miss us screwing up words and acting the fool. If you do that.
And good meat and potato conversation. A lot of
Yes.
people have said they really enjoy our dynamic and the information that we're able to share with them.
Which is why Monday you weren't here was so bad, because
Oh,
we don't
dear.
have our dynamic.
Well, we have a dynamic, and so just always a big shout out to our production team, Jeffrey the Italian Stallion Shiramonte. Do the arm movement. One of these days, we're gonna get Jeff to actually do that on camera.
Oh boy.
And
I don't think so.
the Savage Davey Thompson. So behind the camera, big shout out to those guys. And if you are joining us, whether you're joining us on Facebook, we are gonna air this episode on Facebook for that audience who kind of counts on that. Obviously YouTube, and then obviously all of your favorite streaming platforms. So Spotify, Google Podcast, Facebook Podcast, iTunes, so on and so forth. We have really enjoyed a great rise in listener and viewership to this specific series. And obviously, if you're not familiar, we have a bunch of other really cool how-to videos, and Scott doing the hashtag not a restoration CJ5 build, which is has taken off like wildfire and is a very cool project. And then obviously our normal Tech Tuesday updates that just kind of keep you posted with what's happening here at SFJ 4x4, the physical facility in Conneaut, Ohio. And our marketplace reviews, which is pretty much me. It started out me making fun of Jeeps in the most like polite manner, and now has turned into like people are actually tuning in to like find out how to write a for sale ad, So pretty interesting.
Who knew
stuff
you were
there.
doing classes?
I know, right? But
Well, it's not even that they really want to know how to write a for sale ad. They don't want to be the next Target.
or they do. I mean, we actually have had a couple people going. Like, I actually had a guy call me from the state of Washington, and he was like, "I was hoping that my ad would end up on your on your little program there." Like, he actually called me. This is a guy that I haven't talked to in a couple of years. He's a great character. Just absolutely loved this guy. He was a sales rep for us at one time for a different product line. And he actually called me, and he was like, "Yeah, I just listed a Jeep for sale, and it sold, but I was hoping that you would pick up my ad in the meantime." I was like, didn't do that. And then we had another guy on YouTube just recently reach out and was like, "Hey, review my Jeep." So we're here for that. We are. Do we have some updates? Usually we kind of see what's going on in our lives. Usually, I mean, oftentimes we've built Jeeps. Now we're at a point where both of us, our project updates are not specifically Jeep related.
Yeah, I polished a car.
You polished. We have a customer who wants some paint correction, and I was thinking, we're going to put Scott on that. We're going to put Scott on a little cut and buff.
Yeah, I did do that once to a very faded Cali Scrambler.
That California Scrambler was gorgeous.
It was so
turned out
pasty,
so nice.
and it came out so nice. And sadly, my own car was almost that bad because I take good care of washing it and polishing it.
No,
never
we're not the
never
paint guys.
sits out in the sun all the time. Anyway, so I was feeling really sad. I was driving it a little bit because it was my goal to be driving it for Easter, and I thought
You have a family tradition of driving.
yeah, I try
Easter.
to drive a classic to Easter, something I started a couple years ago. And I'm looking out over the hood and the fenders of my Rambler going, that's not shiny at all. No. So Greg would cringe, but you're supposed to do like this multi-step process where you wash it and you let it dry and you air blow it. And then you do this, put this stuff, and then that stuff.
It's definitely a YouTube video about that.
I just
you didn't.
I just got the buffer out, and I got this turtle wax
Took
stuff.
it dry.
And just kind of
Took a try.
Oh, no.
sprayed all over the hood, and got out the pad and tried not to burn through anywhere more than I did before.
I'm already cringing at that.
And then I wiped that off, and then I put a coat of new finish on there.
Folks, we're not going to let him work. We're not going to let him do that to your Jeep.
I do that to my own stuff.
To your own stuff.
Yes.
So, the shenanigans.
It was cold yesterday, and I didn't want my hands to get cold in the water, so I made concessions.
But you know what? The picture that he showed me looked really good.
It did. I can.
I'll give him that.
didn't want his hands to
You know,
get cold.
and because this
in
is
the water.
we can have Davey put a picture of that in there if he wants to.
Oh yeah, we could.
But yeah,
It's a nice little. It's like you're not going to like this, but we talked about it in the last program. It's a pastel. It's a teal, but it's a pastel.
Yeah.
It's a great Easter cruiser.
Yeah, it makes everybody happy wherever it goes. But it was funny. I was just going to do the hood and the fenders because that's all I see. So real fun, quick
You were
story.
just going to do it for your. I mean, I appreciate that you were doing
Yeah.
it for yourself.
Yeah.
But
And then
Okay.
I accidentally, it's like when you're shaving and you go a little too far.
Yeah.
And you're like,
well, I guess we're going with the
I guess
goatee
I'm going
today.
the whole way now.
I've got a goatee today.
All in. And so, fun, quick story. My next door neighbor growing up, he was an older guy. And, Dennis the Menace, where the young kid follows the person around annoying them. That was me.
No. Really? Yeah.
And
surprises all of us today.
he was an old school, like real hot rodder from like the early 50s, late 40s, World War II.
The great generation of hot rodders.
Yes. And he had a friend that had a car like my sedan, my 36 Ford sedan.
Mm-hmm.
And the only parts of the car he would polish were the top of the hood, the top of the headlights, and the very bubble of the fenders, because that's what he could see from the windshield.
Seriously.
The rest of it was dirty, muddy, messy, didn't care. As long as that shine, good day.
Seriously.
So
Oh my gosh.
that's what I was
So
thinking.
that
of.
rubbed off on you, huh?
Yeah, well, I ended up doing the whole car, roof, trunk, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, you
so
gave in. You
I
sold
gave in.
out. You
Like I
sold
said, I
out
went
to
too
the,
far. I
to
went
the
down,
man.
I went down the fender and I got to the door and I was like, "No, I got to do the whole car now." So,
And did you have the kids in there working with you? Or?
they were actually, enjoying the sunshine yesterday and playing.
So not
and
child labor then.
No child labor. We
Okay.
talked about it,
Okay.
but they found much more entertaining things to do
In the mud,
than
in
to
the-
help
in
me
the-
polish a car.
Yeah. Yeah. My kids have been in the mud recently.
It's a good spring activity.
It is. It's a fantastic spring activity. We had a soccer match. My son was in soccer, and the fields have been flooded for a couple weeks now, and they play,
Say a
which
couple
is
of months almost.
well, yeah, absolutely. It has been a couple months, but playing for a couple weeks. So, so everybody is down there, and their shoes are obviously, pretty muddy and whatnot.
destroyed.
Yeah, and my son goes running across to go see his mom, goes running across off the field now, right? Not in the game of play of soccer, but off the field, and wipes out.
Oh, no.
And he's mud covered from all the way
no.
up and down the left hand side. Not from the actual game itself. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Not this heroic dive.
In true Simpson fashion.
Yeah, he. I had to tell my daughter the other day. I spent a lot of time falling down in sports when I was a kid, so you just kind of got to get used to it at this point.
So I hear the JL needs an onboard water system.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
we just hose the kids off.
Oh my gosh. That's brilliant. That was a big thing. Those of you who are listening, if you had a JK about 10 years ago,
Yes.
that was a really popular thing. These people were taking it was the first time we had this encapsulated plastic tank.
Yeah.
Plastic bumper, right? I mean,
Yes.
the bumper itself was was basically a big hollow cavern of plastic.
Yep.
And you could fill in, we had people, they were doing crazy stuff, JB Weld or plugs, and you could turn that plastic tank into onboard water storage.
Yep.
Which in theory,
Sounds
the
great.
black tank stayed warm while
Yeah.
you wheeled, and then you could take a quote unquote hot shower at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I would love to know if any of those systems are still working.
No.
I mean, we never put one together. We had a couple customers ask us about doing it, and I was like, well, I think we could do it with an RV, an RV water pump and,
Yeah.
on demand water pressure. But I'd love to know. Is anybody listening today or watching who's joining us, has anybody seen one of those bumper tanks? Because there was a brief moment where somebody tried to actually make a product that actually sat. Actually, Rugged Ridge had a product in their Spartan series bumpers that actually had these compartments. The problem is in the Rust Belt here, they all rusted. The hinges rusted shut on them, and there was little locks, and
Yeah.
it all broke. It didn't last very well.
Yep.
Didn't last very well at all. Yeah, and we're working on the Camp Shack, our tiny house. Those of you who are listening or not familiar, my wife and I bit off more than we can chew per usual, and purchased what they affectionately call a Camp Shack, which is this tiny house on skids used in the in the kind of the field services industries.
Well, and something very common with a house and old cars like my 36 is what you see. There's a lot more hiding underneath.
So much more hiding underneath, and
Yes.
and so we started framing in for this big beautiful glass wall that we're putting into this under 700 square foot house.
So
you
half
know?
of it's glass.
So half of it's going to be glass, right? That's my wife is very excited. I mean, I think we'll have absolutely zero efficiency in the winter.
Yes.
As far as
And I apologize to your
insulation.
neighbors now.
You can dance if you want to.
Oh, boy.
You can leave. All right. So, anywho. So, yeah, folks, like I said, this is the Monday after Easter, and we hope that you had a wonderful and relaxing break. Again, we're off, and that's our intention. That's why we're pre-recording this, which is fun. We're trying something new. We're missing our Facebook Live audience that usually, pipes in and pokes fun at us or engages and talks about how great they love their Jeeps. But in general, we are picking up from our segment last week where we were showcasing our, not ours, but Jeep had been releasing a number of 4xe teasers and using them at Easter Jeep Safari, which will, by the time this is airing, will have concluded.
They had diesel, Hemi, and 4xe engines in the
all represented.
EJS.
Yeah, all represented. But they obviously your big newsmakers were that the kind of the quote high horsepower, which is really not the right terminology, but the quote high horsepower electric. What was that? Magneto? Is that what they're calling it?
Magneto, yeah.
Is it Magneto?
Yeah.
Because that's the guy from X-Men.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's Magneto.
Okay.
2.0 that's at Easter Jeep Safari right now.
Okay.
Is X-Men a Disney thing? Did they have to write the
No,
Disney
I think
and
that's
ask
DC.
permission?
Isn't X?
No, it's Disney now.
Is it Disney?
Disney
is it
bought
Disney
it. It
now?
was part of Marvel.
Marvel
So
Universe.
Jeep had to ask Disney for permission. I bet
No,
you.
right now Disney's
Suing them.
lawyers are preparing that. No, that's happening right now.
Magneto wasn't copyrighting.
That's happening
I'd
right
be
now.
surprised if it wasn't.
Disney's actually preparing lawyers. They actually
They
have an
probably
algorithm that's
cease and
listening
desist.
to this program right now.
Oh,
Cease
yeah.
and desist. You're talking about us.
Yes, probably true.
Love Disney. Love it. So, anyways, and then obviously Jeep teased the the bajillion horsepower twin turbo inline six.
Yep.
Which obviously has me very excited.
Oh, so many people are excited online. Just the fact it's an inline six, just all the Jeep lovers.
Well,
are
that
out
that
of
just
the woodwork.
and that is a great segue into the historical relevance or significance of why is a straight six such a ingrained part of our iconic as Jeep
I'll take it one
enthusiasts,
step
iconic
further. Just
history.
inline motors, period.
Inline motors, absolutely.
Yep.
And so so there's a great jump off point to discuss about some of these vintage engine applications.
Yep.
And where do you think we should draw the line? Where do you think we should
vintage?
for vintage? Where do you think we should draw the line?
If
today?
we're talking Jeep, that's L-head is the oldest.
No, okay, so that's the inception. Where do you want to stop? Where do you think we should, as self-proclaimed experts in the field?
It's showing my age, but I don't know that a 4-liter is vintage. So I say 87. Done.
Well, wait a
I'm
second.
totally probably not right.
Wait a
You
second.
do realize how many years ago 87 was at this
Wait
point?
a second. Wait a second.
Shit,
I
Shepard.
will. I'm with you on 91.
Yeah, but the 4-liter came out. No, so you're saying Renix is
I think
vintage.
Renix falls into the
Vintage.
vintage. See, and this is that problem again. What we talked about in the meme
I'll
last
concede. I'll give you that.
time. Okay,
Well,
so
Because Renix is its own total thing.
Renix is its own total thing.
Let me ask this though: what as far as historic plates, vintage plates, classic plates, what year?
Oh,
would be
He's gonna
vintage?
touch me.
Scott, this is
he's
you, and this is gonna hurt.
It is gonna hurt.
This is
25 years or
25
older.
years, which
is-
again, in that
is what
meme,
the state of Ohio says is historical.
with that meme, what a 20-year-old truck, what we think of a 20-year-old truck, and we all think it's like this, like a late 70s square body Chevy.
Yeah.
It
it's
is
actually-
not.
Or at least an OBS Chevy.
It's literally not 25, but literally a 20-year-old truck is an LS truck at this point.
Yeah.
LS
Crazy.
platform. Those of you who are listening who may not be familiar, LS is the engine, the power plant that superseded the Chevy small block.
Yes.
And so while we still live
Came out
in
in 99.
came out in 99, while we all live in the ripple effect of the Chevy 350, which changed American automotive history as we know it,
Yes.
the LS completely took it, flipped it on its head, spanked it, and ran down the racetrack three
Other
times
than it still had
faster.
push rods.
Ford people hate that. Like,
Yes.
let's just easy there, Ford person, right? That's easy there.
I'm not a Ford person.
You-
so
well, you know
technically.
what?
You're restoring
I
right
have
now.
them all.
A, you have all the Fords
I
at this
do.
point.
And I have a Chevy.
And B, the first thing you said about 350s was they have push rods.
And so don't LSs.
Right, but I'm saying like,
That's a Chevy
GM platform, GM platform. But I'm saying the number one thing that Ford people come out of the woodwork are like, those push rods rob power.
Yeah, and Chevy's just like, we're going to do it anyway and still have lots of power.
Lots of power.
And
All right,
the
so
LT series still has push
we're not
rods to my
talking about
knowledge.
GM motors,
No. We got
but
off on
that
a
is
tangent.
that is a 23-year-old vehicle at this point.
Yeah. That hurts me.
We're literally 97. You can historically plate
A TJ.
a TJ, folks.
Yes,
That
you
is-
can.
you can historically plate a 1997 OBD2
Yes.
TJ Wrangler.
In Ohio, you can. Yep. As long as you don't drive it every day and only to car shows.
That
and
hurts
cheap
me.
events.
That hurts me.
You're
I was
welcome
really
for aging, you
excited.
guys.
When I had my XJ and it was a 96 and I could plate that historical, I did that.
Did you know who's not surprised? Anyone.
Anybody.
Anybody who's listened
Yeah.
to this for more than 10 minutes.
Yeah. But it does hurt me now thinking about it.
A 1997
I still
TJ
say
Wrangler.
91. I get what Greg's saying, or not Greg.
Who's Greg? I mean, Greg,
like-
well, I know who Greg
Jeff.
is, but
When
Greg,
is-
I get
when
what
did
Jeff's
Greg show
saying.
up?
would you like to share the coffee?
Yes, I need coffee. This has really rocked my world.
I know
here.
this threw you upside down.
I can't deal with
You
this.
can't deal with it.
Anyway, let's talk about.
You cannot deal. All right,
Let's start
so
with the bit.
so
vintage.
the reason,
Go back in
folks.
comfort.
So, folks, here's the reason why I think we are good to settle on 91, despite the fact that will be a gross overgeneralization of 1941 to 1991, which is 50 years of Jeep power plant technology, which we will obviously not well address in one singular program.
No.
However, in 1991, Jeep reinvents the inline six with
The HO.
the HO. This is why I like you.
When
This is
Chrysler
despite the fact that
touched-
we did a terrible job of the best friends game the other day. you did such a wonderful job of finishing my sentence right there.
Yeah.
That was not planned, folks, but that is exactly Scott knew what I was thinking
Yep.
because
Try to be one step ahead of Neil.
oh, the challenge. That is when Chrysler really
Chrysler ripped up the AMC rule book, threw it away, and said we're doing our own thing. Which,
amen to
as
that.
much as I like AMC, boy, did it need done on the 4-liter.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
my god.
And then and we'll talk about this next week, but of course the 4-liter enjoys a 15-year production run at that point. Now, to Scott's credit, as he mentioned, 87 being a 4.0, we do see, right now we have all of the Comanche and Cherokee, XJ Cherokee guys in, absolutely just livid, saying that their, engine is not a 4.0. It is. By sincere liter displacement, it is a 4.0. However, the Renix, is it best to call it an ignition system? I think is really the Renix era with its closed cooling system and its very unique ignition system. We're gonna lump that into the end of a 50-year motor production run. So, without further ado.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the Bantam Car Company originally. What I wonder what engine they were trying to use.
Bantam was all by itself.
Right, but of course that first quarter-ton prototype. I wonder what engine that it had in there.
I'm pretty sure it had similar engine as the Bantam car did.
Right.
And that's one of the confusing things is the way the Jeep started out. It
In
really didn't-
1941, despite the Jeopardy game that
Yes.
Jeffrey put together.
The prototypes
I
were
know
in
what you're talking
40.
about.
Um,
I used facts.
the lineage actually comes from Willis or Willys Jeeps, which they had the L head in the 30s, and the Americars and all that. And if you don't know what that is, that's the cars that you tune in any gasser reunion, and it's the really swoopy looking car.
The
that's
Willys cars.
jacked
you're
up
saying.
in the nose with a Hemi stuff to the hood.
That's what we call the Carolina squat of the
Yeah.
30s,
Yep.
40s.
That car originally had this little bitty inline four-cylinder that then got shoved into Jeeps in World War II, which was a very archaic, like 20s, 30s design. and they just kind of pulled it out, went and blew it off and put it in the Jeep and was like, that's a proven design, it'll work.
Well, the whole intention was to have a very lightweight.
Yep.
The government contract called for extremely lightweight people carrier.
Which Willys or Willis basically said, no, we're not doing that. We're doing our own thing.
Right.
And they were grossly overweight and overpowered for what they wanted.
So Jeffrey has just produced for us that it was a Continental 4-cylinder in the original Bantam BRC in 1940.
It's useless trivia. A Bantam did not have a throttle pedal. It had a throttle rod like a tractor. You set your throttle and then did your work. So
that is cool. That is cool.
I did not know that.
You learned me something new today.
Yep. And the floor in the Bantam was corrugated like a bed floor too, for strength.
Yes. Right. And we've played with that a couple times throughout Jeep history.
Yep. But, and sadly, that's why when the GIs got the concepts and they're like, here, go drive these and try them, nobody wants to drive a vehicle with a hand throttle. It's just that doesn't work.
It didn't work for them.
So that's one of the reasons why they just didn't hold their own, sadly.
While Jeffrey has the statistics up for us on the screen, I think it's important to note that the original 1940 BRC from Bantam, which is precursor or as part of the prototype development, it was actually 45 horsepower at 3,500 RPM.
Which we can check my brain, but I want to say the Willys was 60 horse.
Okay.
And I want to say there was a 45 or 50 horse restriction. You couldn't go any more than that.
And it was a whopping 86 foot-pounds at 1,800 RPM.
Man.
Ooh, baby. Considering, again, where our modern day,
Can you pull
modern
up
day power plants
the
are.
Willys specs for me, Jeff?
So we're going to, while Jeffrey is doing a little research for us on the production side, we're going to move into that, let's call it that 1940, 43, 45, maybe you should pick up on the civilian side of things.
45. Yep.
And so the 134, the iconic 4-cylinder 134, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah, Quartermaster courts called for only 85 horsepower or 85 foot-pounds of torque at the rear axle. The extra power made the engine choice for U.S. Army.
Yeah. So
I just love that it was called the Go Devil engine.
Yep.
So it had a bunch of different names, right? I mean, and it's interesting, and I think that
which, for those that don't know, we're talking about a L-head or flathead 4-cylinder engine.
Right. So the first design is an L-head, which is that iconic flat fender, flat head.
Yep.
Look.
It's a very short but tall engine. It has a long stroke, which is what helps it have a lot of torque and how it works so well in
so stroke is part of the crankshaft design, right? And this actually Scott had brought up regarding why, as Jeep people,
they're 60 horsepower,
do we find ourselves so enthused by inline engines, right? So, I've seen a couple programs over the years saying, well, why don't we have a V twin, right? To take Harley's, how they how they branded their products, so 2 cylinders kind of in a V, or a 4V, which has been tried.
Race cars have done a lot of modifieds and midgets and stuff. Actually, do run a small block Chevy cut up in the small chunks, and it's a little V4. That's mainly for space. Where a V motor really comes into its own is length. You can have a really short engine fit in places, and it's honestly like my 36. This was Henry Ford's thing, is that the engine was smaller, more compact, where Chevy in those days were inline 6s.
Correct.
And the car nose had to be a lot longer, which intruded into the passenger cabin. And now to wake you back up, we'll go back to Jeep stuff.
I love it. And so one of the funny things with the vintage engines is that they then as they evolve, so our core block doesn't change tremendously.
Well,
we evolved
because
the
we were
head
using
and valving.
1920s design.
Right.
Everybody went overhead valve relatively, right after the war, and here was Jeep going with a 1920s design power plant.
Flathead at that point.
And people were okay at first, but then there's a lot of push for, well, my Oldsmobile has overhead valves. Why don't you? So like everything Jeep does, they tiptoe into it and they become the next method, which is the F head, which
Right.
it's half in the block, half in the head, because we couldn't completely commit.
We couldn't commit.
No.
We had commitment issues.
Yes.
And so we went halvesies.
Yeah, intakes in the head, exhaust is in the block, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And they used where the valve used to go through where the push rod to go through.
And so, interestingly enough, when we went to the overhead valve design, and we go to that now what we call an F head, we actually had to change the design of the Jeep.
Yeah,
So
got taller.
it had to get taller.
Yeah.
Now I have a good acquaintance, and she has produced a picture of a vintage CJ2A, which would have the again iconic flat fender, flat hood, and somebody managed to shove an F head in there successfully by kind of I don't know. She actually didn't disclose it, but I think I'm willing to bet that they Frenched and or recessed the frame rails and dropped the motor lower.
The valve cover actually clears.
It's the intake.
It's the carburetor.
It's
not
carburetor.
even not the intake. If you put a short carburetor on it, it will clear. Or you can do a little scoop.
Oh my gosh! So
your,
if you're
60 horsepowers,
horsepowers can breathe. And folks, this is one of the things on like my marketplace Jeep reviews, and as a purveyor of this for 30 plus years, as I just combed classified ads because I love them so much, I despise the little hood scoop on a flat fender flat hood.
I recognize that it was just a method of keeping your Jeep.
That's
running.
your hot rodder roots.
Yeah,
that's your hot rodder roots. I'm despite the fact that I'm not at all a purist. Not even remotely a purist.
Yeah.
I need that hood not to have that little cardboard box, that little shoe box right on top for the carburetor.
Real quick, another boring tidbit to add into this: the L head actually went into the Kaiser years and was actually used in Henry J's, and they had a Kaiser supersonic head that upped the compression from like a dismal, terrible compression to a more normal, like 6.5 to 1.
From
I think
pathetic to slightly unacceptable.
Yeah,
is what you're telling me.
It was more normal. Cars back then, you ran 4-5 to 1 compression. It was terrible.
So and again, because realistically, nobody is listening to us, but Scott has brought up something called the Henry J, which which the gross majority of humans are not going to know.
So those are also at the Gas for Madness meets.
What
they're a little bit newer.
What is a Henry J? Because
a Henry J is an economy car built by the Kaiser Fraser Corporation, which is who bought the Jeep name from Willys.
So what's really crazy going on, folks, is, and unfortunately the history of engines cannot be separated in our minds from the actual application of what's going on at the big manufacturing level, right? So basically,
as they were bought and sold and traded, the engines changed.
As they're being bought and sold, and basically it's like that. Those folks that you knew in high school or college who like it was like 2 groups or 3 groups of people who knew each other that just kind of dated each other constantly.
Yeah.
This is how auto manufacturers were
constantly
in the early years of the 1900s into the 1950s.
If the big brands didn't actually do that, then the engineers did that.
Absolutely.
The designers did that.
The designers switched teams,
constantly.
right? Constantly are switching teams. So what's awesome in automotive history is you see little flavors of each other manufacturers pop up, and because then as far as the engineers switching teams, sometimes I love that like kids, like the engineer, like the dad would grow up in one brand and the kid would go off to work for a competitor.
Yep.
And you can't help but sit around the dinner table growing up and talk about what makes your job, and then your kid takes it and over to another manufacturer.
Yep.
So as each manufacturer buys and modifies and seeks to make that vehicle their own, despite the fact that it is this Jeep and the name kind of carries on, the motor changes with these manufacturers.
Yep. So at this point in timeline ways, we're early 60s, late 50s. That's when that changeover happened. The CJ5 was born under the Willis or Willis.
No,
moniker.
nobody ever called it Willis then.
I
Prove me wrong, YouTube.
That's what the guy's actual name was, Willis.
Jeffrey called it Willis.
Yes,
It was Willis.
He's that guy.
It's a typical woke kind of Jeeper.
Typical woke Jeeper.
Wow.
Obviously,
Anyway,
he's a
moving on.
gladiator driver
Running away from that now. Anyway,
Deflector.
so
with his bug
With the bug
deflector.
So the next engine after the F-head, to my knowledge, would be the Dauntless.
Well, and I was going to say just momentarily because the flathead, as I think you mentioned, with the supersonic and the hurricane head and all that kind of stuff, it went on to be used in cross applications.
Yes.
Because it actually ends up as a straight six in Willie's pickup and
wagons.
wagon applications.
And that engine was also used in the Kaiser cars as well.
Right, and what I believe that actually is a division. What moves on from there is a division of Continental, which if you've ever been on a job site with an older forklift or a tractor or some piece of machinery, maybe a generator, a on-site welder, those are actually employ in
Both
physical
those
fashion
engines.
both those engines.
Yep.
And so fun fact for you is that our Clark. It's Allis-Chalmers. It's an Allis-Chalmers forklift of the 60s, 70s variety is actually running a pseudo Jeep engine in it.
Yeah, it's got more adaptations and changes, but the
core
architecture,
footprint,
the
architecture is actually a
that.
Jeep engine, which is
Yep.
which is fun for
very
us.
common.
Yeah. So anyway, so we move on through the 50s, and we're running, the F heads. The trucks are running these, semi flathead straight sixes.
Yep.
And again, to circle back to stroke again, that's based on specifically the the manner in which the crankshaft turns. Right. So any type of straight.
Straight up and down.
Straight up and down, and the pistons, firing on a certain sequence, then pushes the crankshaft in its rotation. So if you've ever seen a crankshaft, it's while it's kind of in a straight line, the little offshoots of it are actually at all slights at different angles.
Yep. And then I think it was about 63. This is when suddenly it happened where the nose of the Jeep was really short because we always had a 4-cylinder in it, and people wanted more power. And they're
More
like,
power.
how do we wedge something in there for more power? And so, this is where that moniker comes from. Like, well, they just used everybody else's parts. They went to Buick.
Buick was
And
like, hello,
have
you
a-
look cute today.
We have a V6.
I'll meet you at the water cooler.
And Jeep bought the rights and design of that motor, brought it home, basically just blew off the dust and started using it in Jeeps and called it the Dauntless. So this is where the arguments goes, well, it's a Buick motor. Technically, it's a Jeep motor because they bought the design from Buick.
Right.
And then Buick bought it back, which
Yes.
is super confusing for people.
Right. And the parts are not highly interchangeable.
No.
Part of the issue is that
And that's very common with Buick motors. They're just kind of like, we do what we want.
and that's Buick as a brand.
Yes.
God rest them.
Yes.
But that's part of and we deal with that today just because it shares the name. And in fact, we started this program talking about the 4.0, which a lot of people are just like, oh, the 4.0, it's been around forever. It shares a name, but that's kind of, it shares the name and similar architecture. But that's kind of where it stops, So
Yep.
I'm a Dauntless lover.
Everybody loved what the Dauntless did for a Jeep. Gives it power, small package, that whole 9 yards. And there's every change of the Jeep, there's people still stuck at that change.
Sure.
And they will not transgress past that change.
What's really cool is if we look in what's happening in the greater vehicle atmosphere in the 40s and 50s, and this will kind of cross over a little bit into hot rod. Jeeps are, largely the GIs are coming home and they're using Jeeps in a kind of an agricultural setting. It's very functional. They're going, into the hayfield with it. They're plowing. They're running implements off of it. It's not the cool car. It's not the family car.
And then the farmer's son went to take it, and it was boring.
Yep.
And then they put a V6 in it, and suddenly he could
started to have fun with it.
He could go faster and
Right.
scare his girlfriend.
And and soon enough, you know, in the hot rod scene, right? We're trying to do that kind of stuff in the 50s and early 60s, and Jeep's kind of slowly catching up to that.
Yep.
And
we have to say as part of that, because we are focused mainly on the CJ version, but on the trucks and wagon side of things, they in '63 became the J truck, and the full size Wagoneer was the birth of that under the Kaiser Fraser ownership
relationship there. Yep.
And they used actually 2 V8s and a straight 6. The straight 6 was kind of a really ahead of its time overhead cam 230 Hurricane, which most people didn't like because they were hard to work on. And it was like we're stuck with flathead technology, and suddenly we're going to get real rando and put an overhead cam on.
Oh yeah,
it
was a space. It was a spaceship of an engine as far as people were concerned at that time.
And then they used an American Motors 327, which it is not a Chevy 327.
Nope. Not interchangeable at all.
It's a Rambler engine, and that was before AMC or American Motors owned Jeep. They were selling these motors to them for use. And then a Buick 350.
Which again is not actually the small block 350 per
No.
se. And again, I love this stuff, and as a young person learning about the Jeep world and kind of where do these really gnarly JLs and JTs come from?
Yep.
This is all of that, us finding our way as an industry.
Yes.
And so
and that what makes those full sizes of those era, early 60s from 66 back, I will say basically, you have to open the hood to know what's in there.
Sure.
It could be almost anything.
It could be almost anything at this point, certainly.
Yes.
So we have people who are plowing, their fields with them, and then all of a sudden, they were like, hey, you know what? I think this thing was so functional overseas, we can go across the Rubicon, and now we're crossing territory that previously was just done on foot or by horse.
Yep.
And so this is really the birth of off-roading.
Yep.
Married with the hot rod scene, I like to think is going, okay, well, I need a little more power here.
Yep.
So then the V6 comes out, and they're playing with the V8s. They're playing with these different manufacturers who have motors, engines, power plants available to them to stuff into these Jeeps.
Yep.
And by 71 is when, by 72, we run into the long hood.
Yep. And then
So what happens in reasonably 72 Jeep engineers?
So and then it can't go without saying that in 70 or 71, Kaiser was kind of the road down.
Yeah, they were on a steady decline.
The Jeep brand has always done well for everyone, but the other cars that manufacturer makes is not.
I'm going to steal
always so
this
good.
point right now, and I'm going to kind of sidebar. People always come up to me, and I actually heard you were giving a tour of our facility the other day, and you mentioned that as long as it says Jeep, we service it. And the people that you were giving a tour to were so astounded to hear that we service Jeep Compasses, Patriots, Renegades, Liberties, Commanders, whatever, however.
Yep.
And, I appreciated you making sure to say that, because I've always told people that those additional offerings, product offerings from the mothership manufacturer, is what allows our robust off-road vehicles to exist.
And something else, people don't always put it together because now they are called Jeeps. There has always been a car brand alongside of Jeep from the same parent company.
From the same parent company.
Yeah, Willys had cars, Kaiser had cars, AMC had cars, but
they just branded them differently or separately.
And then in the later they actually called them Jeeps.
Right, and Jeep was the MVP of the team.
Yes.
And so that's why it has continued to exist and be bought and sold in different manners.
Yeah, and I remember somebody saying all Jeep's done is destroy the parent company.
Oh boy.
Every so often.
Oh boy.
Anyway,
that's the golden child.
Yeah, in 70-ish is when American Motors or AMC bought Jeep from Kaiser Fraser, and they just kind of sailed off in the sunset. And that is when the inline six that we all know and love happened.
Is really the. I mean, obviously, you can make an argument for the lineage back to those straight sixes that they were playing with in the 50s, 60s, but the actual, kind of the straight six application that we love
happened then.
happens under AMC.
And that engine was designed in '63. It started off as a 199, and
Absolutely
became a 232.
And most people don't give 199 enough credit.
Yep.
And I'm so glad that you brought it up because everybody jumps in at the 232.
Yep. 232 was the big motor for like 2 seconds.
Yes.
And then in '71 is when the 258 came out that we all know, the 4.2 that they use forever.
Well, and we didn't call it a 4.2 just yet, right?
No.
Because we're not really, because it's America and we don't
don't
appreciate
talk
the
in
metric.
liters.
We don't lead, no liters, no metric equivalencies.
Yep.
No, we called it the 258.
Yep.
And, as far as the thing about these now, the snout, the length, the overall length is
a very long engine.
Is a very long engine.
Yep.
So what do?
We add, we're still broke because we're still an orphan car company.
Yes.
So we're like, how do we stuff this engine in there? And we're like, well, we can add, a couple inches of the frame in the middle really easy, and we can make that fender and the hood longer.
Yes.
And that's what they did.
So they have the long snout. So funny thing is, oftentimes doing shows, I'm kind of up there doing a how-to or being present at a booth, and I can't begin to tell you how many times people have come up with like a set of fenders that they've just bought at the swap meet, and they're like, I have, let's call it an 81 CJ, and I just got the best deal on these fenders.
And we're like,
I can't
those
believe
are
how
too
cheap.
short.
They're too short, right? Because physically they actually look very similar to the, kind of the untrained eye, but the reality of the situation is they're about 4 inches difference there.
Yeah.
And that 4 inches is because of the engine.
Yep.
Right. So it's like when we went to F-Head and we had to go to the CJ3B and then the M38A1, which is then affectionately called the CJ5.
Yep.
These are the things that, that the vehicle then changes around the power plant or vice versa.
And
right?
then the exciting thing happened. Finally, in all this era, time change, they put a V8 in an open top Jeep.
Absolutely.
And that was the 304 American Motors V8, which was actually in its second lifespan. It has also started in the early 60s as a 290, 343, 390 power plants. And around 70, 71, they changed it to a 304, 360, 401.
Not to hijack the conversation, but somewhere in there, International Scout is sort of... So this is that we're dating or flirting or something, right?
Because those numbers... really confusing thing for all this and the more, that's an International motor, and I've heard just about every moniker, as you can imagine, being an American Motors V8 lover. International was worse than Kaiser or AMC, and they had a basic package, and they would stuff any engine in there they could.
Mm-hmm.
So they did use American Motors straight sixes, and they did use for like 2 seconds their V8s, which they also had their own V8s that was also a 304 cubic inch, which is super confusing. And I feel bad for any cord minder guy that's got to figure this out, because it's got to make your head hurt.
Right. We should put together like a family tree. Nobody would look at it, but we would have a lot of fun. Like we would have a lot of fun trying to figure out this family tree.
It's so bad. And so yes, they were using that, but no, that does not mean that your 70 wagon has an International engine,
or that you could easily go out and get an International motor and shove it in there, because that's obviously something we've played.
Just yesterday, I saw a guy that had a 360 swapped into a CJ7, and he's like, "Can I go get an intake from a Mopar 360 and bolt on it?" No.
They sound the same. They are vastly different.
Totally different.
So we were coming back. You were stuffing V8s into CJs.
Yep.
We're getting into the golden era of horsepower.
Yes.
Right now, I don't want to get away from the Dauntless or the Buick kind of lineage, because it streams off into a whole series of V6s, and this is where my own personal love affair with the off-road industry intersects, because at this point in time, the club scene for Jeeps starts to really blossom. Mm-hmm. And so the guys and gals who I believe paved the way for all of our sparkly wheels and lights up underneath the Jeep, and
the ones
blinky
that wore
halos
flannel and had axes and cut trees down,
and then they went racing on the weekends.
Yes.
Right? They took the Jeep from hauling the firewood to
Well,
you know
if you're gonna
to
give me a little horsepower, I got to make it more.
they got to make it more. But what they managed to do is they actually took the Dauntless, the V6 application, and they actually made it spin so fast is the best way to put it, right?
Yeah.
That high RPM that they were simultaneously, so it lagged a little bit because the Dauntless actually comes out before we get those good quality horsepower Jeep engines. And everybody's playing with this V8 and playing with this V8. And then all of a sudden there's a couple guys who are tweaking the V6s and they're like, holy cow, I can get this thing to spin a mile, a million miles a minute.
Which any V motor will rev an inline motor just as
Out rev an inline motor, you're saying. Right, because of, again, that stroke and duration, which is, without putting everybody to sleep at this point.
Yeah.
But
if you're still with us.
We're so excited about this.
We
How
are.
could they not be excited,
At
right?
this point, I'm thinking we almost have to do another episode to continue these motors. 'cause
These
we're
are my
running out of
favorite.
time.
We had 50 years to shove into, 20 minutes. Easy
We're
here.
gonna have to do another episode.
We are going to.
At another time, not a time. We're gonna stay to our course, but then we'll pick like a motor. So these folks start racing these V6s, and they start smoking the V8s in the drag competitions and the hill climbs and the technical
Honestly,
challenges.
that was because the V8s were new and there wasn't a lot of stuff
There
available.
wasn't a lot of support for them.
Yep.
Right? And they were still slightly smaller V8. So, of course, I think
Yeah.
at that point in time, somewhere in there, the 401 comes out
In 71 it comes out.
because they're like,
But that's, it's new.
it's in a big truck,
voodoo
though.
stuff.
It's not in the smaller stuff.
Yeah, you couldn't get it in a CJ. Now everybody figured out really quickly that
How to stuff that 401 in there.
a 304 on the outside and a 401 on the outside are exactly the same.
Right.
You just plug one in and one out kind of scenario. So that happened almost immediately. But you were going to the dealer, you're paying for a crate engine.
Yes.
All the money.
All the money.
I'm sure they weren't available because it was actually lagging. It was supposed to come out in 70. It didn't. They actually made a 1 year only 390 that wasn't used in Jeeps. Just because they were so asleep at the switch.
At the same time, Ford was making 390s just to
Yes.
confuse
Just to
everybody
confuse
in the auto
everybody.
industry at the
Yes.
time.
Of course,
Yes.
they did that themselves with multiple
Wow.
different engines with the same cubic inch. But anyway,
Yes. So we move into the 70s and the 80s, right? So now I
Yes.
think it's important at this point in time,
well,
GM,
and just as Jeep was starting to get some hearse purrs,
Purse.
then the gas crisis came and hit America.
70s.
And suddenly it wasn't cool to have a V8 anymore.
No.
and all the
The big boats of the 70s, 60s,
the
and
EPA
70s.
came down on things, and suddenly it was you need to clean up your act. You need to the pullback. So suddenly you had a motor that 4 years earlier had all the hearse purrs, now was making barely 100 horsepower, with all the extra stuff lapped on top of it.
Right.
So it was very a dismal thing. So we had to kind of re-engineer, and that's where the 4-liter actually came from. It was based off of 258.
Well, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to our viewership if I don't try and figure out where does the GM Iron Duke enter the scene? Because see, Willys has this 4-cylinder, has
Yes.
this, and then all of their subsequent tributaries that purchase and
so that make it even more confusing.
move this along.
Since we want to go back to the 4-cylinder track, about the same time when everybody was crushing down on that thing, they were like, well, we need to go back to basics. Let's put a 4-cylinder in it. They not only did the little Iron Duke 2.5, which is actually a Pontiac engine.
A Pontiac, okay.
But Chevy used it and everything. They actually had an American Motors 2.5.
Yes, I knew that.
That nothing is the same.
No,
And
it's a 2.5, but it's absolutely
completely different
Yes.
engines, and it's actually kind of a straight 6, 2 cylinders chopped off, where the Iron Duke was all on its own. So again, we now have to open the hoods of your Jeep to see what you actually
right.
have.
Despite the fact that it's a 4-cylinder, it could be a couple
Yes.
different ones.
And then they actually, the Iron Duke was for a brief moment in the early CJs, and then that went away. And really more confusing, those Iron Dukes had a small block Chevy bolt pattern for the bell
Right.
housing.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly this is where swapping a 350 into your Jeep got really easy. If you have an Iron Duke CJ, it literally unbolt the 4-cylinder, bolt
Your V8, your
into
small
it,
block Chevy,
and break your transmission immediately. Anyway, they then focus back onto the more traditional Jeep inline six with 2 cylinders chopped off, and they brought that 2.5 on into the TJ years.
Yeah, and that started in '87 specifically.
They just kept re-engineering
the
it and
AMC 2.5. So, and we get up here into the 258, which, arguably speaking, is honestly one of my favorite power plants, arguably in history, and that's one that I think that we can talk about for another episode, because obviously we wouldn't do,
because they changed it over and over. They was constantly redeveloping it, and if anybody's tried to put a valve cover gasket on a 258, will know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
They changed
you know
it a
what
lot.
I just realized though?
What's that?
Next time it's me and Scott on the podcast, all I got to do is talk engines, and he will go on.
Oh boy.
So we come up into the 80s, and we've got, some V8s that are offered. We have the GM 2.5 into the early 80s. We have the 258 running.
Yep.
They're all kind of choked out as far as horsepower is concerned.
And they're all carbureted.
They are all carbureted. They all
except for the 2.5
and
4-cylinder.
And well, in 87.
Yes.
So, and basically what we have is the race for efficiency, right? I'll call it the race for efficiency, because what's happening now after the gas crisis in the 70s, and the motors have had to kind of like implode a little bit. Everybody's had to pull the reins back on their R&D. Now we're
some
trying to figure out
engineers
more
somewhere
efficiency.
decided, like, if we could only have the engine do this on this time and this on this time, it would be better. And we didn't really know fuel injection. Computers were very simple at this time. And so they tried with a very simple rudimentary computer to do that with a carburetor.
Absolutely.
And not only did Jeep try to do that, other manufacturers did as well. And they were adjusting the carburetor as you drive it, which sucked bad.
It was a poor electrical. It was some capacities is vacuum actuated.
Yeah, it was not good.
So we start out in the 40s with this, appetite suppressing 45 horsepower, 80 foot-pounds of torque. Well, the original BRC, right?
Okay.
The Bantam.
Yep.
And we move into a healthy 60 horsepower. And we leave you in this conversation in the 80s with a GM 4-cylinder, a 6, a couple choked out V8s, a rude computer system. And by 1987, we're pushing into the earliest ages of fuel injection. And oh boy, is the industry scared of fuel injection.
Yes.
And how do we make it work?
And at this point, we talked about how Kaiser Fraser was broke or going broke. AMC wasn't doing so hot themselves.
No, they're
on the
downslide.
They're on the downslide. So they're like, how do we get new cars, A, and B, how do we get fuel injection really easy? And this is where the Renault love affair happens, because they're like, well, we'll just go buy it. So nobody locally would play nicely with them, because they were the fourth big thing. So GM and all them were like, no, we're not sharing our secret sauce with you.
You're talking about Chrysler or who?
Well, Chrysler, Ford, and GM kind of was like, no, we're not helping you, American Motors.
Yes.
So they went across the pond to a French company and said, we'll use your stuff.
Yes.
We'll rebrand your cars. We'll sell some of our cars in your market. You can bring your stuff over, and suddenly we'll have front-wheel drive. We'll have fuel injection. I'm sure this was in the board meetings. We're going to revolutionize
it.
And for a brief second, it looked really promising. That car, the Alliance, got car of the year in the 80s, even though it was
very safe. It was a very safe car.
It was a terrible car.
Was it?
Anybody that's played with a French car will know.
Oh boy! Oh boy!
Is they have their own unique thing, and they break down a lot. Anyway,
I thought they were safe, like a crash safety, right?
Because all the marks.
I don't know enough. But
before it broke, it was a really good car.
So is this where the AMC "Ain't My Car" thing came from?
AMC ain't my car.
It
look
was
how
a lot.
creative he was.
It was a lot of
it's like Ford, fix or repair daily. Jeep, just empty every pocket.
Correct.
Social unrest too, because at that time there was a lot of untrust of
AMC was across the pond.
Yes, and they're not being American.
Yes, there was those socialist AMCs.
Yes, so that all happened, and that was uncomfortable at best. But that's when the Renix era 4-liter, to bring us back to Jeep.
Yes. enters
happen.
the scene.
And if anybody's worked on a Renix, and you actually understand the matrix of that, which is complicated because it's French. You either loved it and you learned, I think, to speak French and their ways, or you hated it and it was not a good taste of fuel injection.
I think the vast majority of American car enthusiasts were completely befuddled by it. And it reminds me a lot of that Hurricane 230,
yes,
40
Yes.
years earlier, in the sense
100%.
that it's actually a technology that we are using
Now.
today.
Yes.
But because it was so ahead of its time,
Yes.
and it was uncomfortable or confusing to the average American auto enthusiast,
And-
Western market.
And they went and they bought their Jeep, and it was all great. And then it broke down, and they took it to their mechanic, and he had a cigar in one hand and some whiskey in the other hand. And he was, banging on a carburetor with a hammer. And this thing with injectors come in, and he's like, well, what is this?
Injectors and a closed cooling system.
Yes.
That was one of the biggest criticisms of that, was the closed cooling
system.
And not every, but almost, I would wager to say 80% of manufactured vehicles today are a closed cooling system.
Yeah.
And that was 30 years ago.
Yep.
That they went to that. And by 91, everybody is like, Jeep's back to an open radiator.
Yes. Well, and that is when Chrysler bought. So in '87, not only did this all come out, and AMC was like, "Yay!" but then Chrysler bought them, and quickly they were out the door.
Been about 4 years, just under 4 years of marriage between AMC and Chrysler, and everybody's like, "Well, '86 is the last great Jeep," which there's that we could spend a session on talk all about that, but.
It was built by a company that was going broke.
It was going broke, and so Chrysler and the couple of the AMC engineers left over really do some funny stuff, finding their footing through '87 through '90, and by '91, Chrysler is ready to take their prominence among the big manufacturers and using Jeep as their flagship with the 40 HO.
And I think that one of the best parts about Chrysler did for is they listened to the consumer, which is why more confusion happened, and that's why you see like the full size it was a Grand Wagoneer at this point, was made all the way into 1991 with an American Motors 360 in it.
Yep.
All at the same time, while they were almost making a Grand Cherokee with a
right, the
Mopar
ZJ,
V8.
right.
So confusing. There was just a year or 2 years.
Year or two
shy
separated,
of that.
And I think that's really where they start to stand on their own feet.
Yes.
And the engines then stand on their own feet as well. So pretty interesting stuff. That was 50 years jammed into less than 50 minutes of Jeep and engine. And I didn't even get to talk about my favorite failed diesel engine of Jeep history.
That was also Renault.
It was the Renault diesel, and you know what? Not even going to touch it today. Not even going to touch it. We are going to take a quick break, and then we'll segment right back into our hashtag not sponsored and talk about these very pretty diff covers situated here between Scott and I. Hey, Jeep family, we hope that you're enjoying this content, and we want to make sure that you head over to sfj4x4.com, find some of this cool merchandise. Give us a call at our facility, 440-813-3663. Option 1. And make sure that you tune in to our live podcast every Monday at 10:19 a.m. and check out our updates on YouTube on Tuesdays and Fridays. Until then, Jeep on. Segue.
And now it's time for our product
segue.
spotlight.
Excellent, Jeffrey.
Spotlight.
Hashtag not sponsored.
All right, so we spent way too long talking about vintage engines,
Yes.
and I really enjoy that. I'm passionate about that.
I just wish I would have thought to bring up engines when Scott and I were doing the podcast. It would have saved that episode.
Yeah, but I need Neil to
I was
going to
say, I think there is a little bit of give and take, right?
There definitely is.
I've had some conversation. I'm just going to leave it alone.
So we could talk about axles the same way we just talked
I was
about
going to say,
engines.
I don't even know how we segue into this and retain any type of listener or viewership at this point.
We're going to try to keep it on the Cliff Notes version, but
Right. Let's talk about just the overall why a diff cover is of value or importance.
Well, there's a multitude of reasons. You can see you have ribs for strength and cooling.
Where do I find a diff cover? If I'm just
Well,
your average,
you call
no.
Simpson Family Jeeps,
Well, let's say
and
I'm an
we get you a diff
average.
cover.
I'm an average vehicle. I'm a person who just bought a Jeep, first Jeep ever. What makes me think about this is I hang out a lot in the 4xe groups, which is a lot of new to Jeep owners.
Yes.
And so they're switching platforms. They're excited by the electrification of the vehicle.
Well, you should go change into your working clothes and dirty clothes.
Where do I find it? Where's it physically
and then
located?
You get underneath the vehicle.
Yes.
And you find your tire.
My tire.
And you work your way in from the tire towards the center of the vehicle.
I've never had it described like this before.
Well, I'm trying to give them. They know
like
what a tire is.
I feel like I'm reading like a romantic novel. I found the tire.
Scott does like to get intimate with his vehicle.
He gets very intimate. All right, so I've slid my hand from the tire to the differential.
He's caressing the axle.
I've caressed the axle.
So
past the luxurious spring perch.
on the front, your diff cover will be closer to the driver's side. On the back, it will be in the center of the vehicle. And you will see something that looks like this, but much more boring.
Now that we've excluded everyone but JL and JT owners, so solid axle. It'll look like this, which is beautiful. Those of you who are listening and can't see, is a beautiful silver vein powder coat. A couple different options here. And what's seated before us are the Dana Spicer diff cover. I don't know, Dana 30, Dana 44. They offer them in this silver vein or nodular iron gray. And then solid axle is actually sitting propped up behind. Both of them are similar.
I'd move this as
We're going to show.
Yeah, it'll probably fall, but you can do it.
We're going to show our viewers, and if you're listening, go find it on YouTube right now and check these differentials out. And so there's really, we could get into some high differences and spend way too much time on diff covers themselves.
Yes.
But you can see how pretty these are. The diff cover in 9 out of 10 applications, your factory diff cover now with your JKs, JLs, and JTs is actually it's reasonably thick stamped steel product.
I'll go in as far as like from the 70s on. The front cover is actually thicker than the back cover because they knew you were going to bash it into stuff. But then they've just kept engineering that better and better. The biggest thing you need to know about diff covers, if you're going to change them, is what does that give you? Well, this Dana cover gives you 2 different fill ports. It gives you a drain,
for high pinion, low pinion
on the bottom.
Right, the 2 different fills are for high pinion and low pinion.
So now you can service your axle without pulling your cover on and off, which is a nice piece for that.
Mm-hmm.
And because this is engineered by the same company that made your axles, they think about a lot of things that we would go to sleep about, how the oil flows inside and that kind of stuff. Now, Solid has also done a very good job of designing that for more capacity, how the shape of the cover is on the inside, how the direction of that. They raise up your fill. You still need to put the appropriate amount of oil in there.
If you overfill your axle, bad things do happen.
And you can do that.
We're going to do a whole show on differential covers in the future.
And
we're just going to have to.
And you can totally
I'm
do
getting
that
so
with the
excited
solid
right
ones.
now. I'm getting so excited, and I want to put people to sleep about why diff covers are so
and
cool.
you can talk about the history of
get
solid.
I will talk about the history of these companies.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I'll talk about fluid capacity and
Yes.
friction and expansion.
Yes.
And
He's all hot and bothered now, Scott, because you got intimate with it.
we were caressing axles, and we put on something slinky looking, with
But
these
the important part is
attractive diff
that
covers.
These are 2 of our go-to brands. There is a third that we are dating with currently.
And we do well, and also important to note, Yukon. We have done
and we
quite a
do
few
do
Yukon
Yukons.
diff covers. So our primary line card at this moment, and despite the fact that there are a number of very good diff cover manufacturers, our primary lines are Dana 44s, Dana Spicer diff covers, Solid Axle diff covers, Yukon, and now Riddler has joined our line card at this point. So we're very happy to welcome them onto the SFJ 4x4 line card, and that they will be available here in our service and retail.
And the most exciting
options.
one for those is for those, the real Jeep died in 86 guys.
Diehards.
That AMC 20 rear axle.
Right.
Riddler is one of the few that still makes a cover for that.
Absolutely.
So heard that here, and you can come to us for that cover.
So the neat thing about diff covers, and like I said, at this point in time, I now recognize eventually this will be a session. That what I always tell people in consultation with your gear axle build is that you've now paid us to remove the axles from the vehicle. We've taken out complete internals. We've replaced all your seals. We've hosed out any of the particulate matter, little metal shreds, anything like that.
All the sand and dirt from your wheeling.
All the sediment, dirt from your wheeling that you didn't properly flush your gear oil prior to us coming in to service it.
Never happens.
And we've installed a traction device and gears, right? Yep. We've spent a ton of money, a lot of time, energy, and resources have been invested in your axles, and then we put this stamped piece of steel back on there.
Yep. And
for, $150 or less, typically speaking, or, maybe $200 or less dollars, these are great insurance policies. Despite whatever manufacturer you're going with, so long as they meet a certain number of functional criterion, this is a great insurance policy to ensure that you're not going to be out wheeling and, let's say, you ramrod into a rock under a mud puddle that you can't see, and you can opener up that front, or push it in. Now you've
now
pushed
rubbing
it in.
On your expensive stuff.
Now it's rubbing and machining your front, ring of the ring and pinion, and that's kind of breaking off into chunks and entering your traction device.
And we can attest that these bounce off rocks really well.
I mean, they are thick. They're probably 3/16 or better thickness, with the ribs being strengthening and allowing it to slide on and off obstacles.
And there's a lot to think about with this stuff too, because there's a lot of clearance to the front of the cover, like where your steering is on the front.
Absolutely.
How your stuff intersects with it. And we will help you choose the right cover that is best for you and your build. It isn't one size fits all. You kind of got to pick the right one that fits your project.
I love it. And I'm now that I'm all hot and excited, and we're definitely talking about this one in the future at length.
Yep.
We're gonna stop there, give you that teaser, and we are gonna complete our fun day, Monday, Friday, whatever, with 2 truths, 1 lie. Jeffrey, did you do an intro for this one?
Of course I did.
I love it.
And I even went with a somewhat Easter theme.
Oh.
And now it's time, brothers and sisters. Can I get an amen as we play 2 truths, 1 lie, Easter edition.
He's done.
I love that you folks who are listening in or watching in get to experience that in a live with us, right? I mean, we're hearing that stuff the same time that Jeffrey is playing it for us. So, wow.
I just feel bad for my neighbors because, I was definitely recording that with the window open last night, and I do multiple takes.
Yes.
So they're probably just dying, going, "What is that guy doing out there?"
I love it. So good. All right, 2 truths, 1 lie, Easter edition.
So this is going to be similar to last time. You guys are going to work together to determine which is a lie, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
The first one is competitive art used to be in the Olympics.
Oh.
Teddy Roosevelt once rode a moose, as shown in a photo for the 1912 election. And Americans spend $1.9 billion on Easter candy annually. That's the second biggest holiday after Halloween.
What's he doing to us, Neil?
What? I mean, wait a second.
Which one of those is a lie?
Wow.
We took a hard detour from Jeep
we were
information.
Experts like 3 seconds ago. Now I don't know.
Now I am just a chump sitting around the TV at prime time. Oh my gosh. Competitive art used to be in the Olympics. Teddy Roosevelt once rode a moose, as shown in a photo from the 1912 election.
He probably did that.
I remember this moose thing, but I thought he shot a moose. I like Teddy.
I totally believe we spend a lot of money on Easter candy.
Oh my gosh. Competitive art, that seems like.
I think that's the lie.
Do you think it's a lie?
I think.
I don't know. Jeffrey gets into these really semantics of being
like,
oh, he didn't ride a moose. He was posing next to a moose.
Yes.
All right.
It's 1 or 2.
We're going competitive art.
Competitive art?
Going with competitive art.
You're wrong. Teddy Roosevelt did not ride a moose. It was actually a doctored photo, but there is a legitimate photo of him on a moose.
So is it like a fake moose, a stuffed moose?
No, they actually.
So-
it's the original Photoshop. They cropped him in. It was a publication or a news.
That's 1912 right
Yes.
there.
It's a deep fake.
Yeah.
Folks, you heard it here first. Deep fake of American government. If Disney wasn't listening to us,
Now they are.
now Big Brother is. We're exposing the conspiracy theories of 2022. I knew Jeffrey was going to hit us with some semantics, some BS like, we always teach our kids like they're not going to purposely try and trick you. No, Jeffrey's trying to trick us.
Absolutely.
All right.
evil.
So every round also has an Easter.
I want to know what competitive art, what years? I mean, where's your citation on that? Deep fake.
Yeah. I have it off to the side somewhere.
Sure you do.
There it is.
As he Googles it.
So anyways,
I know. This is like a Facebook argument, Oh, well, that's what my friend and my cousin said. All right.
So round 2, 70% of Easter candy purchased is chocolate.
Mhm.
A chef's hat has exactly 100 pleats. Salt water boils quicker than fresh water.
So
Wait a second. I know this one.
I hope so. Only one thing I'm pretty sure
Salt
salt water
water.
does boil faster than fresh water.
No.
No? Sure.
Why
Why do you
lowers
add
the
salt
freezing.
to your pasta
It-
water then? For taste?
No, it is something because salt lowers the freezing point, or it raises. So you put it in when you make ice cream. You use it. I think
Right.
it's the salt water thing. I don't know. I'm really so right now. This is like so rudimentary. We're losing credibility.
We just picked something.
We're
to
losing
fail at
credibility. I'm going with salt water.
It is the salt water.
Yeah, that's right.
So adding salt can actually make it take longer to boil.
Right. This is the reason you add it to ice water so that it takes longer to freeze. So it stays colder longer because you actually raise the boiling point or the freezing point of it.
So round 3, egg dyes were once made from natural items such as onion peels, tree bark, flower petals, and juices.
here. I believe that.
It's actually so not true, but I'm going to let him go through because that is actually true. But my sister tried it, and it was a dismal fail. Like they all came out just simply different shades of white.
Yeah.
So some cats are actually allergic to humans. And there were only 3 wise men according to the Bible.
What? It's like going down this road. How did we get the nativity story in here?
I told you I had to have something Easter related in every round.
That's
But
not
how
Easter
did-
related.
how
That's
did-
Christmas related.
You know, it's religious.
No. Good Lord have mercy. Now we get in the
It's number 3. Oh my God.
You're correct.
I know, but I didn't realize I was going to be using my religious studies degree today.
I literally referenced that this morning. He was telling me a little bit about it. I was like, oh, Neil's going to have that on lock.
I honestly, I wasn't sure that you get that because most people don't realize it never actually mentioned how many.
I
wise men.
literally have a degree in religious studies. Like that is my thing.
Told you, Jeff.
So
I don't bring it up constantly. I don't need to beat you over the head with it,
So we only ever use 10% of our brain.
I want to talk about cats being allergic to humans, though. Like that's really what the internet's for,
I
right?
feel bad for that cat.
Oh, I feel bad, right? I mean,
Stop signs used to be yellow from 1922 until
see, there's a
1954.
stinking technicality in there somewhere. It's probably no, it was 1923. Here's my citation.
Because they were yellow with jewels on them.
And the White House Easter egg roll event has been celebrated by the President of the United States and their family since 1870.
And that could be off a year or two.
Right? I don't trust Jeffrey. At
No,
this
I do
point.
not trust Jeffrey.
How many rounds are there?
This is one more after this.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Put us out of our misery. I always want to go to the Easter egg, the White House Easter egg roll.
I don't think I think they eliminated the stop sign before 1954. But I could be completely wrong.
I don't know, because everything that he's going to do is he's desperately trying to,
I thought that was more like a World War II change thing.
Oh, cool. Let's do that. Let's do it. I'm following your lead.
Wrong. So the lie is that we only ever use 10% of our brain. In fact, we actually use every region of our brain almost every day.
Jeez.
Throughout specific tasks, or those specific tasks do fire only specific regions.
How is that about Easter?
I have no idea.
How is that about Easter?
not-
How is the
You should fact check them with Chris, though.
we're gonna fact check them. We're fact check.
Round 5.
Facebook's gonna flag us, take the video down because we're gonna get fact checked.
Yeah.
But then they'll be like, oh, he's right. So
Oh,
Dr.
geez.
Seuss' classic Green Eggs and Ham started as a bet with his editor that he could not create a book using fewer than 50 different words. Eggs contain nearly every nutrient known to be essential to humans, and chewing gum takes 7 years to digest.
Chewing gum.
I'm going to go with Neil on that one.
You guys got that one correct.
Yeah, that's the one we all got told. Like in the '90s, they're like, if you do that, it's gonna be a big ball in your belly.
Yeah, but in fact, the gum base actually passes right through our
Yeah.
system. So
Yeah, don't swallow your gum.
Yeah.
Like that's still not
I'm
good.
still telling my kid that.
Yeah, we should not do that. But the other ones, that was really fun, actually, Jeffrey. Those were good. They were unusual.
Way to humble us after us being so.
After motors and differentials
Yes.
and 3 wise men. All right, folks.
Okay.
I hope you're at home with your family to the best of your ability when you get to watch this. If not, make some time. This is we try to have as appropriate content as possible. Happy Easter to you from SFJ 4x4. You can obviously find these every Monday at 10:19 a.m. on Facebook for about 24 hours. Then we pull it down. Then it goes up on all of your favorite streaming platforms on Wednesday. And then our post-production version goes onto YouTube, where you can then access it on the SFJ 4x4 TV channel and all of our other cool videos in the process. If you haven't yet, head over to sfj4x4.com and grab yourself, one of our cool hats or our shirts. Make sure you're representing it to all of your shows and events this summer. And obviously, any of those platforms, please, take a moment to leave us a review, reach out to us, give us a comment, call into our facility at 440-813-3663, extension number 1 if you need something from us, and you'll get a human to talk to. Otherwise, you're getting voicemail box so that we can access it at a later time because we're very busy. And with no further ado, on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe, ring the notification bell so that you're getting updated every time we post some very cool Jeep and auto content. Until then, Jeep family, Jeep on.
Jeep on.